So welcome to the inaugural and first ever Rigby Campfire Podcast, which is something we've wanted to implement for a while. We meet so many fascinating people at Rigby's, and this is a great opportunity to bring them before a camera and talk about some of their stories, their relationship to the company. I'm Marc Newton, the CEO of Rigby's. I have a very dear friend and legendary hunter with us, Buzz Charlton. How are you doing today, Buzz?
Pretty good, Mark. Thank you. Honoured to be here with you.
No, it's a pleasure. Buzz, why don't you get started? Tell us about how you got into big game hunting originally.
Well, originally my father used to hunt in Kenya, Mark, up until when they closed, which I think was 1966. He then passed away in an accident, but I had all of his photographs, and as a young kid I would go through his albums with amazing pictures of the various animals that he had hunted in Kenya, and that stirred up an interest. And originally I wasn't sure whether I wanted to get into become a photographic guide or hunting. And in Zimbabwe, if you get your hunting license, you're entitled to do photographic guiding. So I thought I'd kill two birds with one stone, and I started my apprenticeship straight out of school, which was when I was 17, 18. And in Zimbabwe, it's a five-year course, and I got my license, and I started in the Zambezi Valley. Ironically, in an area that, as a company, we now have ourselves, and we focus on a lot of dangerous game hunting, with the emphasis being unfenced, ethical, pure hunting.
This is something we're very passionate about, Rigby. So, of course, we're first and foremost a gun-making firm, but we wholeheartedly support ethical, fair chase hunting, which is the only kind of hunting that should be happening, and of course with a conservation message in there as well. And on the topic of conservation, you've been so well known for your big game hunting, but you've also done a huge amount for conservation through DAPU. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, Mark. So, it must be going back about 15 years ago. We had a poaching endemic that came in really from Mozambique. So our main area has a long border with Mozambique and Zambia. And on one hunt alone, we found 20 different poached elephants. Yeah. I mean, it was a particularly bad time. And at that stage, we realized as good as our national parks were, they were totally underfunded. They just were not going to be able to contain this massive problem. So we started up with 7 game scouts that we trained up, and we called them DAPU, which stands for the Dande Anti-Poaching Unit. And over time, it's grown to 22 game scouts. And although it may sound a lot, that's in 500,000 acres. It's not a lot, but it's definitely been a turning point in our area, in the sense that not only have we managed to stop the ivory poaching, but more importantly, we've stopped the snaring. And what that is a number of villages put out wire snares, and it's for meat, and it's not just for personal use, it's for commercial, and that therein lay the problem. And they've managed to take out now 15,000 snares from our area. So they've been fantastic, and it's all based on situations where they will benefit. For example, if they catch an ivory poacher, they get a financial bonus. So there's an emphasis on that. And we've got a system that works very well, whereby informers, which is a big thing, they will get $100 credit if they give us information that leads to us arresting poachers. So it's been a fantastic success.
Oh, brilliant. And it's, I think if you go onto any social media channels where you've been promoting DAPU, and I remember seeing these very striking images of handfuls of bundles of snares, and it's something that's not, we think about anti-elephant poaching things, but just the sheer volume of snares for catching smaller game.
Yeah, everyone focuses on elephants, they are iconic species, but the reality is it's everything, right from your impala through to buffalo, and the snaring was the major problem, and I often compare it to like a landmine in that it doesn't have an expiry date. When that snares out, it's there and will kill an animal. And the other problem with them is once they lay snares out, if they don't check them regularly and they catch an impala, for example, and it starts to rot, the next thing is you get your predators coming in because of the smell, and lions that get caught in them, and hyenas and leopards. So they're incredibly detrimental. So one of our greatest focuses with DAPU is the removal of these wire snares. And as I say, to date, I think we've got 15,000 out of our area. That's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got customers from all over the world who follow and support Rigby as a brand. For those customers who haven't been to Africa, the question I'd love to ask you is could you explain how hunters' dollars coming into a place like Africa support conservation? Because, of course, the idea of hunting animals in some people's minds sort of goes against the idea of promoting the species and growing numbers. Can you explain that to us?
So I can explain it, and what I will do is explain it with regards to our area. So when we got our area, which is called the Dande, which is situated in the northern part of Zimbabwe, it's a community area. And even though we have massive areas with no people living in it, we have probably about 5,000 people that live within the area. And when we got the area, we went into a joint venture with the communities. And that was the first time that's ever been done. So every dollar we earn, they get 50 cents. We're a 50% shareholder. So whether it's the daily rate that if you came hunting with us, for example, Mark, and you came and paid $1,000, for example, the community would make 500 out of that. And if you shot a buffalo for $5,000, they would take half of it. So the good thing with that is it really makes the communities understand the value of wildlife, and they directly benefit from that. And what they've done is, as the communities, they've set up trusts and bank accounts for their various communities in each area. And at the end of the hunt, the money's put directly into their accounts, and they choose to spend it the way they want. And it's been incredible. They've put in lots of freshwater boreholes, which is hugely important. The clinics have been redone. Schools have been redone. And definitely the standard of living for the people in our area since we've started hunting and gone in a joint venture has improved dramatically.
No, fantastic. And as someone who's been in the industry for 30 years, you've hunted with clients from probably most countries where there's a passion for hunting. What do you think it is that brings people back to Africa over and over and over again?
Good question. I would say certainly in our part of the world is the experiencing true wild Africa. And I'm a little biased in that it's where I've been hunting and operating rather than your smaller fenced areas. Certainly our return clients love the wilderness and the true aspect of pure hunting, tracking, when you're tracking buffalo, bumping into elephants, hearing lions at night. And I think what's vitally important is these areas like the Dande, that we can keep them going in as pure a form as we can, in that they are unfenced, true wilderness areas. And I think more and more people are appreciating that. And that would be, I think, the greatest reason people come back is the pure excitement of hunting in these magnificent wildlife areas like that.
And how about the same question, but for dangerous game? What is the magic when it comes to dangerous game that brings people back?
Yeah, again, the magic, I think, it goes without saying, is there's an element of danger in it, and although you never want to charge, it does happen. But I think it's the excitement of following dangerous game on foot, which is what we do in the valley. And track has become such an important part of your hunt. By following an elephant or a buffalo on foot and having close encounters, you're getting down to the purest form of hunting. And I think that's really what gets guys coming back for dangerous game, is that fact, getting close and personal. And enjoying the hunt the way it's supposed to be, which is on foot and tracking and watching these amazing people follow animals and being part of that whole process is a pretty special experience.
Yeah. I had the privilege of hunting with you last year in Zimbabwe, and seeing your guys, your trackers were absolutely amazing. I've been very lucky to hunt in several places in Africa and met trackers and teams of people with various abilities and experience, but your guys were just on another level. We had so much fun with them, and watching them work and tracking dangerous game and how they can pick up just the tiniest little pieces of spoor, which I certainly couldn't see. Even when they were showing me the spoor, I couldn't see it.
Yeah, I'm so fortunate, Mark. My guys, not only are they, and I may say this myself, exceptional trackers, they really are. Each guy knows his individual job, including my driver, which, funny enough, is a very important part of the team. He's always picking you up after long walks. He's making sure the cruiser's in good shape. He also drives around and can tell that's a nice elephant track, call you. I mean, he's a very important part of the team. But I've often said if I was to have to start a game, if my trackers, for example, were to leave me, I wouldn't have the heart to start again, because it takes years and years for a team to gel together, everyone to know their roles, and when they do, it makes a safari an absolute pleasure. And the other important thing for me is my guys really enjoy it, and I think that's important. They're out there, they're having fun, but they're working like Trojans, and they are true professionals in every aspect. So very fortunate, as you've seen, good guys.
No, they were so passionate, and you could see when we were tracking, if they picked up a really good track, there was a very different response than a very average track. It was okay, let's go for a walk. But when they saw the track, it was let's
totally focused. You feel the level of commitment just picking up there, and you can just tell in their body language they're as excited as us. They know that this is potentially the one, and when they get to that stage, literally, they will carry on until you pull them off. They're so focused on it.
Again, I've been so privileged to hunt in many places in Africa and through Asia, Australia, North America, and it's definitely a case of you could be having the best hunt of your life, whether it's the animal you're following, the whatever it is, but the pH, the guide, makes or breaks that trip. I've been on some terrible hunts with a great pH, and this is not of course reflecting on our time together, but and I've been on trips with a great hunt but a terrible pH, and it's completely spoiled it. And I think spending time in camp with someone like yourself, and you were so patient with us and sharing stories and not wanting to talk all about yourself, you're so humble and self-deprecating actually at times. It was hilarious, some of the stories you came out with. And that was, I think, for me, so refreshing. And that, combined with your guys who are so passionate, that's for me why I think you've been so successful in the industry.
Thank you, Mark. For me, it's really credit to the guys. And you'll often hear a PH harp on about how good they've been. But really, behind the scenes, when it comes to the actual hunt itself, if you don't have a good team, you're not going to be successful. So I've been very fortunate. And I've also been very fortunate in our career to meet so many different interesting people, and in reality, what a great time to spend time with interesting guys. They've all got a story. They're invariably successful, and to be around a campfire and to be part of that whole story of theirs is quite a privilege. So I'm very fortunate. I love my career. I'm very, very fortunate.
I think that's why Simon and I at Rigby's wanted to start this podcast, because there's something about sitting around a campfire, a couple of gins inside you, and sharing stories and lies about hunting, and and there's something in all of us as human beings, I think, sitting around fire and talking about the day and the adventure of tomorrow, and those have always been the most vivid memories I've got from my times in Africa, and it was again no different when we were in Mutengwe last year. Yeah,
absolutely. You're reflecting on an amazing day, and you've got the expectation of what's happening tomorrow, and as you say, whiskey and a cigar every now and again by the campfire is a really special way to end the day off.
So what would, in your 30 years, your experiences of Rigby, you must have seen many Rigbys out and about over the years, new ones, old ones. From a PH's perspective, what do you feel about the company and its history and its place in the safari world?
So obviously Rigby's is an iconic name, Mark, and I initially started with quite a few Europeans and Germans in particular, and they didn't come out with a lot of Rigbys, but then we started gravitating more towards the American market, and more Rigbys were coming out, and absolutely wonderful guns. It's been such a privilege to see some of them, the workmanship, and a real treat. And what I'm hugely excited about is the new box lock that's coming out, and the reason I say that is I think it will become obviously more affordable to your average sportsman, and for them to be able to afford a quality gun like that's going to be a real treat. And as I say, a number of my clients are talking about it, excited about them, ordered them. So it is a treat to hunt with quality guns like Rigby. It's been great.
Yeah, there's many names that are have been involved on the African continent over the last 2 centuries, but I would say it'd be hard pushed to find one with such a relationship with that place, as Rigby.
Oh, absolutely, it's going back obviously generations and generations, and like everything, it's everything. Rigby's been through a bit of a hard time when we were California based, but wow, certainly from a reputational perspective now, it's they're really top of their game. It's very credit to you guys.
No, I think it's much the same as your own team. We have a phenomenal team in London, and hopefully you'll get to meet them next week when you're down with your family. It's all about the people and getting the people passionate about it. And when we relaunched the company in 2013, it wasn't so difficult in the sense that we had this amazing historical reputation, this sleeping giant, and we just had to gently wake him up and give it a bit of love and really get back to what Rigby was famous for in the past. Not try and recreate or reinvent the wheel, just get back to proper Rigby guns made by passionate people. And a lot of our guys have hunted Africa or want to hunt Africa, so all of that goes into every gun that we do.
Well, I can tell you this, unsolicited is, I've had a number of clients that have been wanting to buy a double, and they've gone around the various famous gun makers in the UK, and the one thing that has come from everyone who's visited you guys is everyone is accepted and treated exactly the same way. And I think that's a very important thing, because quite often your double gun business in the UK is considered an upper class establishment, and one or two people visited, other guys don't really got the feeling that they weren't welcome. And I can tell you what, guys from your blue-collar guys to other fellows that we hunt with, very wealthy people, will get treated exactly the same way. And I think that's vitally important, and you guys do a magnificent job with that.
Oh, thank you. And that's really come from Paul Roberts, who was my mentor, and the guy is legendary in gun making and African safaris, and he was always about bringing his own experiences from Africa back to his gun making and making sure people felt welcome and that they could share in those stories. And we're very lucky at Rigby's as well to have access to so many customers who've been there and friends like yourself who've hunted Africa. So we can listen to how our rifles are being used and how they performed in certain situations. And all that feedback goes back into our guns and goes into the advice that we can give people before they head out there. So for me, it's all about the people and making sure that they're passionate and the right approach is found. So, Buzz, we're here in my family home here in Scotland. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're doing the next few days and what you were up to yesterday?
Well, I'll tell you what, as a kid, I spent many days reading an old magazine called the Charlton Salmon. We have a little place up in our Eastern Highlands, Zimbabwe, where we have a few trout, and I remember flicking through those beautiful magazines and seeing these pictures of salmon and thinking one day, I'd love to come and try and catch a salmon. And obviously in those articles there was the Tweed River, which was just a name to me. And I'd never think that 40 years later I'd have the privilege, which is what happened yesterday with Simon. We went up to the Tweed, and we were blessed with incredibly glorious weather, which I didn't think existed in Scotland. And in fact, so much so I'd even take a hat, I got sunburnt. I never thought that would ever happen in Scotland. But we fished, and there were a ton of fish around. It was, fantastic. I didn't land one, but I certainly had a couple of knocks, and it's definitely ticked a box for me that I never thought I would. So I highlighted my fishing career.
No, very good, very good.
And then, as you know, tomorrow's another one that we've talked about on Safari and is now going to become a reality. And that's thanks to you, Marc, who invited me up to go and shoot some grouse on the glorious 12th, which again we've read so much about as kids, and never thought that would happen. And we're doing a walk-up grouse hunt, which, as I say, is going to be interesting, because I'm normally shooting inbound elephants at 15 yards and not grouse flying away at 60 miles an hour. So I can't guarantee you hitting many birds, but I'm certainly going to enjoy it.
Well, as I said to you this morning, you're only here to try and get the bag up. I've really talked your level of shooting up with everybody. So I'm
going to horribly embarrass myself then, I'm afraid.
But I think you'll do that anyway, just wearing your Crocs. I don't know how well they do on the hill.
Well, I must admit, I kind of set myself up for a fall, letting Marc, he's going to kit me out in all the tweeds, because as you can imagine, coming from Zimbabwe, and as Marc says, I normally hunt in Crocs, I would be ill-appropriately dressed. So I've let Marc kit me out, and I might be in for a fall.
I was looking back through the videos from our time on Safari last year. There's one video where you're with your guys looking at some tracks, and I secretly have my camera out and I'm filming you, and I say to the camera, the real professionals here, and you shout, no cameras. And as you walk towards me, I said, there's there's only one thing worse than hunting in Crocs, and that's hunting in one Croc. And there's Buzz walking along with one Croc on and one barefoot through the sand. I'm not quite sure what happened.
I have to put it in perspective. People think I'd be an absolute clown, but we'd been driving along and the guys had knocked on the roof and there was an exceptionally big track, and I was so excited I jumped out and I left one Croc behind in the car. So that's kind of how that happened. I don't normally cruise around in one Croc.
Well, we won't let the truth get in the way of a good story. But no, looking forward to tomorrow and to sharing the occasion with you. And, you know, we talked before about Africa being so special and it brings people back. And I think Scotland's the same. It's a very emotional place. You know, there's a lot of people, again, from America who have heritage which dates back to Scotland, and a lot of people love to come here, and it's very romantic. I think that's the word I'm looking for, very romantic. Being up on the hill on the 12th is an absolute privilege. I remember the first time I was invited to shoot grouse by a very dear family friend, and we finished the first drive, and I thought this was the greatest day of my life. It probably was until I was hunting in Africa, and he turned to me and he said, "You remember this, my boy?" He said, "Shooting grouse is a privilege."
Yes.
And it absolutely is, because so much work goes into preserving them more, and these birds are completely wild. They can't be reared. You can only manicure the hill in a certain way to make sure the numbers are there.
The numbers, yeah.
So it's a lot of work goes into it for just a few birds, and they're also fabulous eating. So the whole theatre of the 12th is a very special occasion, and looking forward to sharing it with you.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to it. I had no idea how incredibly beautiful driving up yesterday. The hills, the heather, and it's absolutely stunning. It doesn't look like hard walking, but I think I'm going to be in for a surprise tomorrow. I think it's substantially harder than it actually looks.
It'll be good to get my own back a little bit from all the hard walking in Zimbabwe. It'll be a little harder for you. So, Buzz, the other topic I wanted to discuss with you, this sort of interlinks. So in the UK, we're experiencing some big changes in firearms manufacture and shooting, and the biggest of those is the banning of lead shot. So the UK government, working with various organisations, is looking to phase out in the next 5 years the use of any lead shots for driven game, for clay shooting, for rifle shooting, and we all know the dangers of using lead. And for us at Rigby's, we see this actually as an opportunity. Of course, it's a big threat to gun making in the way that it's been done, and it's probably the biggest change in firearms manufacture in maybe 100 years, I would guess. But at Rigby's, we always embrace these things. We see it as an opportunity, new models, new ways of doing things, working with new kinds of metal, steel in this case. And that ties in very, very interestingly with Africa. So there's often a little bit of, I suppose, a negative outlook on the future of African hunting. And Paul says to me, Paul Roberts, that even back in the 60s, they were saying, oh, we might get 10 more years out of it, but we're still here in the 2020s. Africa's probably more accessible than it ever has been. You can book a hunt online, you can fly there, on an aeroplane. What is your view of African hunting now, and your client base, and where it's going to be in the future?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, Mark, and to put it into perspective, and I go back to something you mentioned. My father gave up hunting in Kenya when it closed in '66, and he said there'll be no more future of dangerous game hunting, and he was correct in Kenya. But ironically, 50 years later, here I am still hunting in a very vibrant industry in Zimbabwe that is going from strength to strength. So, there's a lot of doom and gloom. There's a lot of negative talk about it. But when it creates the employment it does in, for example, Zimbabwe, and I only talk about Zimbabwe, this is Botswana, Zambia. I talk about Zimbabwe because it's my home country and I know it better. But for people to fully understand hunting, I think you need to see it through the African's eyes in Zimbabwe, and it's an industry that generates a huge amount of foreign currency for the country and the communities. It provides a huge amount of protein, and I know that doesn't sound like a big thing, but it's not a big thing for us, and can go to the supermarket, buy a steak. All of our game goes back to the community. It's a very important part of their diets. It's working well. There is a massive future for hunting in Zimbabwe and Africa as a whole, because simply put, many of these areas, the Dande where I hunt, including is areas that you would never turn them into photographic. You don't have the game numbers, you've got tsetse flies, you've got thick jess, basically situations that would not be conducive to photographic, and the only alternative use is hunting. And these areas would not support cattle, can't support cattle, sheep, goats. So it wouldn't work from a farming perspective. And even if it did, what would end up happening, like we've seen through vast stretches of Africa, it gets totally outgrazed and overgrazed, and that becomes the end of those wilderness areas. So really, on a positive note, the hunting industry is growing in Zimbabwe, and it is well respected amongst the local communities, and to the point that they are quite confused why there is a negative connotation in the first world. So certainly from Africa, the hunting is going super well, and we are taking a lot of bookings, and it's looking good, looking very good.
So there will be a lot of people watching on the podcast now, Rigby customers, Rigby fans, who will have met you at the shows. A lot of them have probably hunted with you. I've hunted with you last year, and as I mentioned, it was an absolute privilege. You are one of, if not the top guy in Africa right now with your crew. For those who don't know you, how can they reach out to you to talk about booking a hunt?
You can go through our website, which is www.cmsafaris.com. We've got our contact details on there, so very easy to reach me through that. And it'd be an absolute pleasure to chat to anyone interested in a hunt or just general chit-chat about hunting.
Yeah, very good. And so at the shows as well.
And at the shows. So we go to the Dallas show and the SCI show, and we're intending to go to Salzburg as well, which was, I believe, quite a nice show also.
Yeah. As I say, for anyone watching, we've been very lucky to hunt together last year, and I can really vouch for having a brilliant time. And just to be clear, Rigby has no professional relationship with you, Buzz, but really it was a fantastic time. So I can highly recommend. You mentioned before there as well about protein, and it's something I've talked about with some of my friends here in the UK who aren't hunters. And we might be at dinner parties, and of course, my wife and I are there, and the topic comes up what I do, making rifles for Africa, and some people take perhaps a dimmer view to that, and how can you do that and support that industry. But I think when you're sat there and you have a belly full of food in the West, it's very easy to tell the African peoples of what they should and shouldn't do with their game. And you mentioned earlier in this discussion, snaring, and it's all about just trying to put food on the table for their kids. And if there isn't the value of game there, if the money isn't coming in to protect these things, then the people are going to just eat them. It's simple as that.
No, it is as simple as that. It really is. And as I say, in our area, the communities have got to realize that, for example, a buffalo is worth X amount, and that's a whole lot more than if they snare it, because they get the meat anyway. They're getting now the trophy fee as well as the meat. And we have a system that every bit of meat is distributed. We have villages on a roster system, and meat gets dropped off each time, and not a single grain of meat is wasted. Even discussing things like elephant, that's 6 tons of meat, and not a piece of meat is left, and it goes a long way for these communities.
Well, on that subject, I would say I've been privileged to have seen many sites in my 35 years on this planet, but I have never witnessed raw humanity as I have done at the recovery of an elephant. It was very emotional, actually, just to see the people of what it meant to them, because, of course, we go back to camp and we have dinner and food and beer and wine and all these things, and what this carcass, this meat, this protein means to them was extraordinary, and the talking and the sounds and the smells and the cutting of the meat and the sharing it out, and this huge occasion, and we were in the middle of nowhere, and next minute we had 300-400 people congregated around this thing, and like you say, there was nothing wasted, like nothing.
I gotta say, and the recovery that you watched was a very well organized recovery, and I've seen ones that degenerate into literally warfare, and I often think, from the Western world, if we were doing it, what we would do is get the stronger to cut, and then everyone would be given a piece of meat. But if you really sit and think about it, a lot of these people have not had protein for 2 years. So, how would you behave if you suddenly were confronted with that? So, I take a step back, but what I can say is, every single piece of meat is used, and it is an emotional thing to see. Well, hunting an elephant is an emotional experience, and to see these people and how happy they are at the end of it, and the meat's gone, the trophy fees go towards bettering their lives, and they appreciate it, and they know that.
No, there were standout moments from that, watching, them breaking up a leg, and there were knives and daggers and axes and machetes and hands everywhere, and how no one got cut is beyond me. I mean, there's just a frenzy of cutting going on. And then one of the other stand-up memories was seeing the little children there, and really thinking of my own children who live a very blessed life in the UK. We're so lucky up here. And what that meat meant for those children and for the parents able to feed them. And this is completely overlooked by some of us here in the West. We take our comforts
so
for granted.
I'll tell you a very quick funny story based on an elephant recovery and a boy watching this little kid, and he was trying to get around this carcass and get himself some meat. And as I say, normally might is right. The strongest guys get the most and the weakest get very little. And this little guy was trying to get in, and he was getting pushed out by all the strong men around these elephants. And eventually, you could just see he was dejected. He didn't have a plan. And then I watched him walk around to the biggest, strongest guy who was cutting on the haunch where the most of the meat is. And what they do is they put a sack of meat between their legs. They cut and they put the meat in there. And this little kid had the presence of mind to go behind, and he cut a hole in this guy's sack. And as he was putting in meat, he was taking it out the back. But he had the presence of mind to call it quits before this guy realized something was wrong. And literally, a second or two later, this guy braced himself to lift what he thought was 50 kgs of meat. And of course, it was an empty sack. But this little kid had got away. So, yeah, credit to him. But it's an interesting experience. So.
I'm sure you've got many stories which you could share with us. I'm sure a lot of them, the ones I've heard, we probably couldn't share on the podcast. If you want to hear those, you've got to book a safari with Charlton McCann Safaris. There was a customer you told me about, the British guy. And you've hunted with me. The British banter, I think, is right up there. Is it Mr. Jolly?
Or Robert Jolly, great guy.
You must share the story, please, of some of the gags that he pulled on you, which I thought were hilarious.
So, yeah, Rob, great practical joker, great sense of humour. Hunted around the world, loves his bird shooting and fishing as well, and loves a practical joke. And but he's pretty switched on, and to try and get him back is quite tough. And he had played a few on us, and we tried to reciprocate, and he was far too wise. But we did manage to get him out the one day. The one trophy he really wanted was a hyena, and we managed to buy a full-mounted hyena, and we had got the camp manager to go out before us in the morning. We told him which route we're going, and he'd managed to put this fully mounted hyena on in the riverbed, and myself and Rob were driving in the front with the trackers, and the cameraman, who was also part of he knew the gig, what was going on. So he was filming, and we were driving along, and actually Rob was telling me, which he didn't realize was on camera, was going about how dicey his stomach was, which added to the humour as was getting filmed. But we get a knock on the top, and the trackers say, "Bere, bere, bere," which in Shona means hyena, hyena. And as I say, it's a trophy that had eluded Rob for many years. So, "Rob, there's a hyena win." Pointed in the river, and he couldn't believe his luck. This thing's just standing looking at him, grabs his gun, gets out, throw out the shooting stick, so he shoots it once, and he shoots it again, and the penny dropped, and he just looked at us and said, "You buggers." But I should have known that to start pretty much a war with practical jokes with him. And when he goes to the extent like he did, he ended up coming all the way to the show in America.
From England.
From England.
Yeah.
To catch me out on a practical joke. And what actually happened there was he arrived at the show, unbeknownst obviously to me, and he had unshaven for like 3 weeks, a stubbly beard, whiskey beard here and there, and he had these incredibly thick glasses on that made his eyeballs look about that big. Hair was unbrushed. He had a pillow in his stomach. He looked like this huge overweight madman, to the extent that even, as you know, those beautiful girls that sell calendars that will sell to anyone, they had one look at him and ran away. I mean, that's how bad he looked. But came up to the booth, and he came right close to me here, and he said, "Oh, you Buzz Charlton?" And I say, "Yes, sir." He says, "I want to book an elephant hunt." And this kind of guy, he couldn't even walk 20 yards. And then he had me going for absolutely ages
He
before
didn't know it was him.
And I had no idea. He had false teeth. I mean, he had gone the whole way. But, incredible man to go to that extent for a good practical joke. But I've shared many great hunts with him. And as you say, the English humour and banter is pretty good. So, great guy. So we're very fortunate in our career. We get to meet a lot of interesting and great people.
Absolutely. You're definitely going to see more of that banter, I think, tomorrow. It's as we did in Zimbabwe. The British banter is right up there. And I think the other thing I wanted to say, while we've got you here, is I can remember from a very young age wanting to go to Africa and hunt some of the dangerous game species. And your fantastic DVD, which talks about hunting in Africa and really breaks it down in rather like a encyclopedia of how to do it and without too much hunting porn, as I would call it. It's a very informative DVD. I can remember watching that as a teenager and thinking, this guy is the coolest bloody hunter ever. And then I met you, but I realised it was not the case. But, but no, really, to have hunted with you, to call you my friend, to have you here at our home really means a great deal. And the fact that you would come all this way to spend time with us and all of my other friends and our family as we hunt grouse tomorrow is very, very special. So thank you, Buzz.
Well, it's been an absolute privilege. The only thing I'm sad about in that comment is when you mentioned as a teenager watching that video, it makes me realise how actually bloody old I am. So hopefully I'll keep up on the moors tomorrow, but been an absolute treat. And you guys have been incredibly good hosts so far, and you were obviously for the duration. I'm very humbled with what you guys have offered me. So thank you very much.
It's an absolute pleasure. And we'll, as I say, this is wrapping up the end of our first of our Rigby Campfire podcasts, and we're going to hopefully have many more other interesting people in the industry that we come across, share a few minutes on a sofa or wherever we are to talk about Rigby and hunting in general. So Buzz, I'll just say thank you one more time, and looking forward to tomorrow.
No, thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
Really great, very grateful to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Ciao.